The hum of the engines filled the cabin, a low, constant vibration that usually lulled passengers into a false sense of calm. But not tonight. Tonight, that sound carried a weight none of them understood. The plane had taken off smoothly from New York just after sunset, the horizon painted in strokes of crimson and violet. Families tucked themselves into their seats, business travelers opened laptops, and children dozed off with headphones pressed against their ears. It was supposed to be just another overnight flight. And somewhere in the middle row, a young black woman sat with her head tilted against the window, eyes closed, her breathing even. She looked ordinary, invisible, a passenger among passengers. No one on that plane knew who she really was, or what she was capable of. But they were about to find out. 30 minutes after takeoff, the first sign of trouble appeared. A sharp jolt shook the aircraft, overhead bins rattling as if unseen hands were pounding them from the inside. Gasps filled the cabin. The captain's voice broke over the intercom, strained but steady. "Ladies and gentlemen, we are experiencing unexpected turbulence. Please remain seated with your seatbelts fastened." The flight attendants moved quickly, checking belts, calming passengers, repeating the same words in soothing tones. But even as they reassured, their own eyes darted nervously toward the cockpit door. Because turbulence wasn't supposed to sound like this. The second jolt came harder, violent enough to throw a drink cart against the aisle, soda cans exploding as they rolled beneath seats. A baby wailed. A businessman cursed under his breath. Someone muttered, "This isn't normal." And then, the captain's voice again. But this time, it wasn't calm. "If there is anyone on board with military flight experience, please make yourself known to the crew immediately." The words hung in the air like smoke. Passengers blinked in disbelief. Had they heard that right? The woman by the window didn't stir. Her head rested against the glass, as if she hadn't heard a thing. But the captain repeated, his voice cracking this time. "Any fighter pilot on board? Please, this is urgent." Gasps spread. Murmurs rippled through the cabin. People glanced around, searching faces, looking for someone, anyone, who might raise their hand. A retired veteran? An off-duty pilot? Someone who could explain why a commercial airliner, at 30,000 feet, needed a fighter pilot. But no one moved. The mother in row 12 hugged her child tighter. The old man in 7C crossed himself. The businessman in 14A demanded answers from the flight attendant, who only shook her head, pale as paper. And still, the woman by the window slept. Or so they thought. The captain's voice trembled now. "If there is anyone, with tactical flight training, we need you in the cockpit. Please." The murmurs turned to panic. Something was very, very wrong. Planes didn't call for fighter pilots unless there was a threat no one could imagine. And yet, row 17, seat F, the black woman did not move. Her chest rose and fell. Her hand twitched slightly, fingers curling as if gripping an invisible control stick. But her eyes stayed closed. A man 3 rows behind her hissed, "What the hell is going on?" Another whispered, "Hijackers? Terrorists?" The panic spread like wildfire. Finally, the flight attendant moved down the aisle, her face tight with fear. She stopped near the sleeping woman, hesitating as though sensing something beneath her quiet exterior. For a moment, she just stood there, staring at her, as if debating whether to wake her. Before she could decide, the plane lurched again. Oxygen masks dropped from the ceiling, dangling like ghostly faces. Screams tore through the cabin. And in that instant, the woman's eyes snapped open. Not groggy. Not confused. Sharp. Focused. Cold. She sat up straight, yanked the mask aside, and scanned the cabin in one sweeping motion. Her movements were precise, controlled. Not like a passenger caught in panic, but like a soldier reading a battlefield. The flight attendant gasped. "Ma'am, did you hear the announcement?" The woman's gaze flicked to the front of the plane. She already knew what she had to do. She stood, calm in the storm of chaos, and her voice cut through the screaming like steel. "Take me to the cockpit." The passengers froze. Heads turned. Eyes widened. The flight attendant stammered. "But, how do you?" The woman's expression didn't waver. "I was a fighter pilot. United States Air Force. Now move." The cabin erupted into whispers. Some passengers gasped. Others muttered. Disbelief and relief tangled in equal measure. The flight attendant's eyes filled with tears as she nodded, then turned, pushing through the aisle toward the cockpit. The woman followed, every step measured, steady, unstoppable. As she passed row after row, passengers stared, some reaching out as if her presence alone was enough to anchor them in the chaos. A child whispered to her mother, Is she gonna save us? No one knew the answer. The cockpit door loomed closer. Shouts could be heard from behind it. Frantic voices, alarms blaring, the unmistakable sound of systems failing. The woman reached for the handle, but before the door opened, she paused. Just long enough to whisper to herself. 7 years away from the sky. Let's see if I still remember how to fly. The door swung open. The light of the cockpit spilled into the aisle, red, blinding, alarms screaming in every direction. And then, the screen fades to black. If you think she's just going to step into that cockpit and save the day, you're wrong. Because what she finds waiting for her isn't just a failing plane. It's a secret no one on board was prepared for. So tell me in the comments, do you think she'll pull them through, or will this flight be her last? And make sure you subscribe, because the next will take you into the cockpit itself. And trust me, you don't want to miss what happens when the truth comes out. The hum of the engines filled the cabin like an unbroken drumbeat, steady but suffocating. Every passenger sat frozen in their seats, breaths held, eyes darting toward the captain's announcement that still rang in the air like a blade slicing through silence. Is there any fighter pilot on board? Head swiveled. Murmurs rose like static. Some whispered in fear, others in disbelief. What kind of emergency could force a pilot to call out for such a thing? And then, slowly, almost reluctantly, the woman in seat 23A stirred. She had been asleep, her head leaning against the frosted window, as if the world outside didn't matter. Her hair, long and dark, shifted over her shoulders as she raised her head. Her eyes opened, not groggy, but sharp, calculating. Those closest to her noticed first. And in that moment, they swore her gaze carried the weight of storms. A stewardess, trembling, leaned toward her. "Ma'am, did you hear the captain's request?" The woman blinked once. Calm, unflinching. And then she nodded. "I heard," she said softly. Passengers gasped. The tension stretched so tight it was as if the whole plane would snap apart. The stewardess whispered, Do you mean you are?" The woman's lips pressed together. Not quite a smile, not quite a denial. She stood. Her every movement carried the kind of authority that couldn't be faked. And then her voice, low, steady, yet carrying the force of thunder. "I was a fighter pilot." Chaos erupted in whispers and cries. Some clapped out of desperation. Some looked at her, as though she were their last thread of hope. Others doubted, muttering under their breath. How could she be? A black woman, sitting quietly, unnoticed, suddenly revealed as someone with such a past? But the captain's voice broke through the intercom again. "Whoever you are, come forward immediately." She began walking down the aisle. The passengers parted, their eyes following her like a trail of light in the darkness. Some reached out, brushing her arm, as though touching her would mean safety. Others simply stared in awe. By the time she reached the cockpit door, silence had fallen again. The steward unlocked the door, and she stepped inside. Inside, the captain sat drenched in sweat, his knuckles white on the yoke. Beside him, the co-pilot was pale, his hands trembling. And then she saw it, out through the windshield. A shadow moving against the clouds. Not just turbulence. Not mechanical failure. A threat. The captain pointed, his voice cracking. Unidentified aircraft. No response to radio calls. "It's tailing us, and it's armed." Her jaw tightened. "Show me the readings." The co-pilot slid the radar screen toward her. A blinking red dot loomed closer, gaining fast. The captain's eyes searched hers, desperate. "Tell me you can help." She exhaled once. A soundless, controlled release of air, as if steadying not just herself, but the entire cabin full of souls behind her. "I can help," she said. "But only if you trust me." The captain hesitated. His authority as commander of this flight trembled in his hands. Could he hand over his cockpit to a stranger? But then, the intercom light blinked red. A message. A voice crackled through. Cold, distorted, commanding. "Flight 707. You will divert course immediately. Fail to comply, and we will open fire." The co-pilot whimpered. The captain's face drained of blood. The woman? She simply leaned forward, her eyes narrowing at the shadow in the clouds. And then she whispered, almost to herself, "I know that voice." Her past, the one she had buried beneath years of silence, surged back like a tidal wave. A mission. A betrayal. A name she had hoped never to hear again. The captain gripped her arm. "You recognize them?" She didn't answer. Not yet. Instead, she turned back toward the cabin door, looking at the hundreds of innocent passengers. Families clutching their children, elderly couples praying under their breath, strangers whose fates now balanced on a knife's edge. And in that moment, she knew there was no choice. The past she had run from was here, in the sky with her. She turned back. "I'll take control." The captain froze. Then slowly, wordlessly, he lifted his hands from the yoke. The co-pilot swallowed hard, stepping back. And the woman slid into the seat. The leather groaned under her weight as her hands found the controls, familiar, yet foreign after so many years. Her fingers curled around the stick like they had been waiting for this moment, as if destiny had been circling above the clouds until tonight. She looked once more at the radar, the shadow approaching like a predator. Then she pressed the intercom. Her voice filled the cabin. Calm. Unwavering. The kind of voice people would follow into fire. "This is your fighter pilot speaking. Stay calm. Whatever happens next, don't lose hope." Gasps broke out. Some began to cry. Others clapped, desperate for courage. Children leaned forward in their seats, wide-eyed, as if she were a superhero stepping out of myth. And then she turned the plane slightly, forcing it into a position that told the other aircraft one thing. She was no civilian. She was here. She was ready. The comms crackled again, the same distorted voice. "Who is flying that plane?" She pressed the switch, her voice sharp, cutting through like steel. "You already know." The silence that followed was almost worse than the threat itself, because it confirmed the truth. They knew her. She knew them. And this was no accident. The shadow outside dipped lower, closer. A flash of metal. A missile mount. The captain whispered, "Dear God." The woman's jaw set. "They won't fire. Not yet. They want me alive." Her hands danced across the controls, steady, precise. She was leading the commercial jet like a soldier leading civilians through a battlefield. The captain leaned closer. "What do they want from you?" Her eyes never left the windshield. "The same thing they wanted years ago. Control. And they think I still have it." The co-pilot frowned. "Have what?" She didn't answer. She couldn't, not yet. Instead, she banked the jet just enough to test the other aircraft's response. Instantly, it matched her move, like a shadow chained to her past. And then, for the first time since she had stood from her seat, her hand trembled. Just once. Because deep in her gut, she knew what no one else on this plane yet understood. This wasn't about hijacking. It wasn't about money. This was personal. The voice returned, sharper, colder. "You thought you could disappear. You thought you could bury what you did. But we never forget. We never forgive. And tonight, all those lives on board depend on you." The cabin lights flickered. The passengers murmured in terror. Somewhere, a child cried. She closed her eyes, just for a second, feeling the weight of every life pressing down on her shoulders. And when she opened them again, her gaze was fire. She whispered, more to herself than anyone, "Not tonight." And with one sharp move, she tilted the plane, sending it into a maneuver no commercial jet should have been able to make. Passengers screamed. Luggage tumbled from overhead bins. Drinks spilled. But the shadow behind them stumbled too, caught off guard. For a moment, hope sparked. But then, the radar beeped. Another shadow appeared. Then another. 2 more armed aircraft sliding out of the clouds, flanking them. The captain's face collapsed. "We're surrounded." The woman's fingers clenched around the controls, her heart pounding like a war drum. She whispered the name of the one man who had haunted her dreams for years. The man whose voice she thought she'd never hear again. And then louder, for everyone in that cockpit to hear. "This isn't about them. It's about me." The co-pilot stammered. What do you mean?" Her eyes burned. "They don't want this plane. They want me. And if I don't act fast, every soul on this flight will pay for my past." The engines roared louder, the cabin shook, and the shadows outside tightened their grip like predators circling prey. And then, out of the comms, that same voice whispered her name. She froze. The captain looked at her in shock. They knew her name. And now, the entire plane was a stage for a war she thought she had left behind. The cabin shook again, and outside, the lead aircraft's weapons locked into position. The passengers screamed. And she realized she had seconds to make a choice that would either save them all, or doom every soul aboard. The intercom flickered red once more, and the cold voice spoke. "This is your last chance. Surrender, or watch them burn." The woman's grip on the yoke tightened, her breath shallow but fierce. And then she whispered a single word, one no one expected. "Never." The plane dropped suddenly, screams tearing through the cabin, as she pulled the aircraft into a move that defied gravity itself. But as the world spun and the shadows closed in, she knew this wasn't just a fight for survival. It was the final reckoning with the ghosts of her past. And the truth about who she really was, what she had once done, was about to explode into the open. The screen faded black. Her voice lingered in the dark. If you think this is terrifying, wait until you learn why they're really here. Comment below what you think she's hiding, because in next the truth about her past will shake you to your core. Don't just watch, subscribe now, because what happens next is darker, deadlier, and more shocking than anything you've seen so far. The air inside the plane had grown so heavy it felt like every breath was stolen rather than earned. Passengers clutched armrests, whispered frantic prayers, and stared at the sealed cockpit door, as if it held the answer to whether they would live or die. Outside the windows, the shadow of 2 military jets still tracked their every move, a constant reminder that this was no ordinary flight. And in the middle of it all sat her, the woman everyone now stared at like she was both their salvation and their doom. Her eyes were half closed, but not from fatigue. No, she was listening to the whine of the engines, the distant crackle of the captain's radio transmissions, and the rhythm of fear in every passenger's heartbeat. She had once been trained to read situations like this, to calculate risks in seconds, and to act before hesitation cost lives. But that was a lifetime ago. The little boy across the aisle broke the silence first. His voice was soft, trembling, yet piercing enough to cut through the thick dread. "Miss, are we going to die?" The woman opened her eyes slowly, and for a heartbeat the cabin lights reflected something sharp in them, something forged in fire and war. "Not today," she said softly, almost like a vow. But even as the words left her lips, the intercom crackled to life. The captain's voice, strained and uncertain, filled the cabin. "Ladies and gentlemen, the U.S. Air Force has instructed us to maintain current altitude and heading. We've been identified as a potential security threat. Please remain calm." A ripple of gasps surged through the passengers. The word threat lodged itself into their minds like a thorn. And every single pair of eyes snapped back toward her. The businessman who had been recording on his phone stood up, voice trembling with anger. "It's her, isn't it? They're not after us, they're after her." Others joined in, whispers turning to accusations. "What did she do? Why would the Air Force chase a passenger jet unless she's dangerous?" The woman sat perfectly still, letting the storm swirl around her. Then she rose. Slowly, deliberately. And in that moment, the whole cabin seemed to hold its breath. "Sit down," a flight attendant urged, panic rising in her voice. But the woman didn't. She stepped into the aisle, her presence commanding, her silence louder than their shouts. Finally she spoke. "You want the truth?" Her voice was low, but carried to every ear. "Fine. Here's the truth. Once upon a time, I was the kind of person who would have been flying one of those jets outside." The cabin erupted. Gasps, shouts, fear. A woman clutched her child tighter. A man muttered, "Oh my God." She raised a hand, and despite their terror, they listened. "I was a pilot. Not just any pilot. I flew combat missions you'll never read about. Missions that never made the news. Missions that saved lives, and ended some too." Her words fell heavy in the air. Every sentence was a confession and a revelation. "But," she continued, her jaw tightening, "I made a mistake. One mission went wrong. A decision I made cost lives that shouldn't have been lost. Civilians. Innocents." Her voice cracked, just for an instant, but she steadied it quickly. "I left. I walked away. I swore I'd never sit in a cockpit again, never hold the power of life and death in my hands. And I've kept that promise. Until today." The cabin went silent. The truth was worse than their rumors, but also stranger. "But why are they chasing us?" someone asked, trembling. Her lips pressed into a thin line. "Because I didn't just walk away from the military. I walked away with something they wanted buried. Something that proves they've lied, again and again, to the world. And now," she nodded toward the window, where the jets stayed glued to their flank. "Now they think I still have it." The businessman snapped. "Do you?" For a moment, her face was unreadable. Then, slowly, she reached into her jacket pocket. Every passenger leaned back, as if she were about to pull out a weapon. Instead, she revealed a small, weathered USB drive. The metal casing was scratched, dented, worn by years of being hidden in shadows. The passengers stared at it like it was a live grenade. "This," she said quietly, "is why we're still alive." Before anyone could ask what she meant, the intercom buzzed again. The captain's voice shook. Ladies and gentlemen, the jets are requesting we divert. They're ordering us to land at a military base, not our scheduled destination." Chaos broke out. "What? They can't do that. This is insane. We'll disappear there. No one will ever see us again." The woman's hand clenched tighter around the USB. Her mind raced. She knew exactly what would happen if they landed at that base. The passengers would be interrogated, maybe worse. The drive would vanish, locked away forever. And she wouldn't leave alive. She looked around at their terrified faces. The mother clutching her child, the old man whispering prayers, the boy who had asked her if they would die. And in that moment, something hardened in her chest. "No," she whispered. She strode to the cockpit door, ignoring the startled flight attendants. Her fist banged on the door. "Captain, open up. Now." There was hesitation. A pause. Then the lock clicked, and she slipped inside. The passengers craned their necks, desperate to see what was happening. Inside the cockpit, the captain and first officer looked pale, sweat glistening on their brows. "Ma'am, you can't be in here. Shut up and listen." She slapped the USB drive onto the console. "They're not chasing you. They're chasing me. If you land at that base, every soul on this plane becomes collateral damage. But if we play this differently..." Her eyes flicked to the radar, to the jets closing in. "We might just have a chance." The captain swallowed hard. "What are you suggesting?" Her voice dropped to a razor's edge. "Let me fly this plane." The first officer's jaw dropped. "You can't be serious." "I'm dead serious," she snapped. "You either hand me that yoke, or we all end up as pawns in a game you don't even understand." The captain hesitated, torn between duty and the fire in her eyes. Finally, he whispered, "Who are you?" Her gaze didn't waver. "Someone who already gave up her wings once. But right now, they're the only thing that can save you." And as she slid into the pilot's seat, hands steady on the controls for the first time in years, the cabin behind her erupted with fear and speculation. Passengers pressed to the windows, watching the jets, watching their fate close in. But none of them could predict what came next. Because the woman had a plan. A reckless, impossible plan. And if it failed, every single soul on that plane would vanish into the night sky. The engines roared louder. The jets tightened formation. The passengers braced for something they couldn't even name. And just as the first officer reached to stop her, the woman whispered under her breath, "Forgive me for what I'm about to do." The plane tilted. Hard. Passengers screamed as drinks flew, bags toppled, and oxygen masks dangled. The woman's face was calm, almost frighteningly so. Because this wasn't panic. It was precision. A maneuver only someone like her could pull off. And as the cabin filled with chaos, she muttered just loud enough for herself to hear. "You want your truth? Then come and get it." But the question that burned in every mind was, would her gamble save them, or doom them all? The answer would come in fire and fury. And if you've stayed with me through this storm, here's what I need you to do. Because the next of this story will be unlike anything you've ever seen. Drop your thoughts in the comments right now. What would you do if you were on that plane? Would you trust her? Or would you think she's dragging you all to your deaths? And before you even blink, hit subscribe. Because when I reveal what happens next, you won't want to miss it. The plane bucked violently as she pulled the controls into a maneuver that commercial aircraft were never designed for. Passengers screamed, the aisles littered with fallen bags and oxygen masks, swaying like pendulums of doom. The captain shouted warnings, the first officer clawed at the controls, but her grip was unshakable, her eyes locked on the horizon. The military jets flanked them closer, their sleek forms cutting through the clouds like predatory shadows. The crackle of the radio pierced the tension. A cold, metallic voice ordered, "Flight 287, you are ordered to divert immediately. Failure to comply will result in force." Force. The word echoed like a death sentence. The passengers heard it too. "They'll shoot us down," someone cried. Mothers pulled children close, prayers filled the air, panic consuming every corner of the cabin. But the woman didn't blink. She had been here before, surrounded, outnumbered, hunted. She had survived because she never listened to fear. Her hand slid over the autopilot controls and disengaged them. The alarm blared, red lights flashing, but her voice cut through. "Listen to me. They want this plane on their ground. If we give them that, you'll never see daylight again." The captain stammered. "You can't just..." "I can," she snapped. "And I will." With a sudden dive, the plane lurched downward. Passengers pressed against their seatbelts as gravity seemed to vanish. Outside, the jets scrambled, one peeling upward, the other diving to match her insane descent. The G-forces pressed hard against her chest, but her grip remained steady. In the cabin, chaos ruled. Drinks flew, cries rose, but beneath it all, a realization dawned. This woman wasn't panicking. She was flying. The boy who had asked if they would die clung to his mother, eyes wide, yet he whispered, "She looks like she knows what she's doing." And she did. Her mind was a map, charting every possibility, every insane maneuver, every second stolen from death. The ground loomed closer, clouds breaking apart to reveal city lights below. "Level off," the first officer yelled. "You'll rip us apart." But she only smiled, a smile that chilled him to the bone. "Not if I do this." With a brutal pull, the plane leveled just above the skyline, engines screaming, passengers gasping as they skimmed rooftops like a shadow out of nightmares. Alarms blared in the cockpit, but she silenced them with a flick, her eyes scanning the city below. The jets, caught off guard, struggled to keep pace through the dense airspace. She banked hard, weaving between clouds and radar coverage. The captain's voice cracked. "You're insane." "No," she corrected coldly. "I'm free." The passengers, still reeling from the near-death plummet, began to realize something terrifying. This wasn't just about escape. This was about her war with the people chasing her, a war they had unwillingly stepped into. And yet, there was something magnetic about her defiance. Something that made some of them whisper through trembling lips. "Maybe she's our only chance." But then, the radio buzzed again. This time, the voice was different. Calm. Familiar. "Commander. Stand down." The woman froze. The word hit her like a gunshot. "Commander." Her knuckles whitened on the yoke. Her jaw tightened. Slowly, she reached for the radio. "I told you," she said, her voice like ice. "I'm not your commander anymore." The reply was chilling. "You always will be. You think you can run? You think you can bury what you know? That drive in your pocket is worthless without you. They don't need the evidence, they need your voice silenced." The cabin went silent. The passengers didn't understand the full weight of what was happening, but they understood one thing. Their lives were bargaining chips in someone else's war. And the woman knew it too. She could run. She could keep fighting. But she couldn't do it forever. Her eyes dropped to the USB drive on the console. That tiny piece of metal was why these people were in danger. Why she had been hunted. Why innocents had died before. Her breath trembled once. Then steadied. She slammed the radio down, looked at the captain, and said, "Get ready. This ends tonight." With a wrench of the controls, she veered the plane toward open water. The passengers cried out again, but she ignored them. Her focus was absolute. The jets followed, their lights reflecting on the waves below. And then, she pulled something no one expected. She activated the plane's emergency transponder, not to call for help, but to broadcast. To every frequency. Her voice filled the airwaves. Calm, unyielding. "This is former Commander Alana Reeves. If you're hearing this, know that I was hunted for speaking the truth. This drive contains proof of operations hidden from the world. Proof that your families were lied to, your soldiers betrayed, your innocents slaughtered. If this is my last flight, let the world know. It wasn't an accident." It was silence forced upon me. The cabin was dead silent. Passengers stared in awe, fear, and disbelief. Her voice hardened. "You wanted me silenced. You just made me louder." The jets outside hesitated, circling, their commanders listening, realizing the woman had just turned a secret operation into a public spectacle. But then came the twist no one saw coming. The captain pointed at the radar. Another signal, something's inbound. Everyone's eyes widened as a massive military aircraft appeared, approaching fast. This wasn't a patrol jet. This was something else. Alana's face darkened. "They're sending the cleanup crew." The passengers gasped. "What does that mean?" Her eyes flicked to the sea below, then back to the plane. The truth was brutal. If that aircraft reached them, it wouldn't matter that she had spoken. They'd all be erased. The boy's voice cut through the fear again. "Miss, you promised we wouldn't die today." Her heart clenched. She had promised. Her fingers brushed the USB one last time. The drive that had destroyed her life. The drive that had dragged these people into her nightmare. She made her choice. She ripped the drive free, shoved it into the captain's trembling hand, and locked eyes with him. "If anything happens, you get this to the press. Promise me." He stammered. "What are you?" But before he could finish, she stood, her eyes blazing with the fire of a soldier who knew this was her final mission. She strode into the cabin, the passengers watching in stunned silence. She didn't look like a fugitive anymore. She looked like a warrior. She opened the emergency hatch override. The wind howled, passengers screamed. The crew tried to stop her. But she turned once, her eyes meeting theirs. "You don't need to trust me. You just need to live." And before anyone could move, she leapt. Out of the plane. Into the roaring sky. The passengers shrieked. The boy cried out. The mother covered her child's eyes. The jets scrambled in shock. The massive aircraft swerved, adjusting course. But the woman, Commander Alana Reeves, was gone, vanishing into the Black Sea below. Or so it seemed, because in the cockpit, the transponder still blared, and the USB drive still pulsed in the captain's hand. Her sacrifice had given them a chance. A dangerous, fragile chance. But enough. The plane veered towards civilian airspace, away from the military trap. The jets lingered, then pulled back, unable to justify firing now that the broadcast had gone public. The passengers wept, hugged, whispered prayers of thanks. But none of them would ever forget the image of the woman vanishing into the storm. And as the plane finally landed hours later, emergency crews swarming, cameras flashing, reporters shouting, one truth burned brighter than all the chaos. Her story wasn't silenced. It was just beginning. And somewhere, in the dark waters below, maybe, just maybe, she wasn't finished either. Because legends don't drown. They rise. Now, if you're still here, ask yourself this. What do you think happened to her? Did she survive? Did the world believe her? Drop your theory in the comments. I want to read every single one. And don't just watch stories like this. Be part of them. Smash that like button, hit subscribe, and share this with someone who needs to feel the adrenaline tonight. Because the next story will make this one look like a warm-up.